Sweet. Okay, we're all good. Hey guys, welcome to the third edition of Product Hackers. Seb and I have loved running these. I think this was kind of born out of an interest of community engagement, idea sharing, and really just a love for product management. All Squares, we're a recruitment company. We do a lot of roles in the product space, as well as working with quite a lot of product organizations here in Melbourne. Yeah, thank you to All Squares and Product Box. I'll let you kick things off, Seb.
Sure, mate. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you. All good.
Cool. So yeah, this is our third. I think about 18 months ago, we collaborated on bringing Product School to Melbourne, and really the main purpose of that was to get people to share their stories, their experiences, some of their perspectives. It's definitely the way to learn in this day and age, for sure. I think I've said it last time as well. People call this, learning 3.0, where you learn from each other, and learning 1.0 is quite old school, where there's an expert teacher and they tell you what you have to learn. And then learning 2.0, it sort of encourages some dialogue. Learners ask them questions, but there's always an expert that defines the answer. And then there's learning 3.0 for this complex world that we live in today, where learners are sort of defining the questions and the answers. And we sort of thought that, this is a really good forum where we can bring the right people to tell us their experiences, and so we can learn from those experiences. I'm pretty excited about today because from a personal perspective, I know I've had a lot of product screw ups, so which will probably longer than an hour session we'll need for that, and we might need a therapist as well. But there's a lot that you learn from your successes, but I sort of feel as though there's a lot more that you learn from your failures if you reflect on those failures and really take the time to understand some of the root causes. I had a lot of screw ups, and I know in one particular instance I launched a startup, and it was quite successful for about 50 days. And all the learnings from my past, I brought into this startup, and it was successful in the first 50 days, good revenue, good user growth. And then regulations changed, and basically it was shut down in one afternoon. And I didn't really see that coming as quickly, and certainly a lesson learned from that. So now when I do things, I've got a bit more of an eye on, regulation and government and things like this. So, there's so many lessons, and I don't think we're ever going to learn all the lessons. So more and more we talk to people like what we have today, the quicker we're going to learn some of those lessons. So really happy to have Shannon, Phil, and Susan on today. I think we're going to kick off with Shannon. Is that right? Yeah. So Shannon, I will ask you to unmute, and if you can, then we'll get going.
Great, thanks very much, Sav. Hi, everyone. So look, firstly, a note on screw-ups. I would say that it takes a village. So on a personal level, my screw-ups are many. They are emotional, they go undiagnosed, they're never proven, they're very personal, but they are many and quite small, uninteresting examples. So I think in startups, I do believe you're all in this together. If you're transparent, if you establish credibility in your intent, if you are mission-driven, then the screw-up isn't mine. It's not that of the individuals, it's ours. So today I'll be talking about screw-ups at the company level. So who's talking? So I'm currently a product director at Airwallex, and historically, including spending around 11 years with Palantir technologies, I've always been in roles that sit on either side of product management. So if you consider product as the intersection of the business goal or the user goal on one side and the technical art of the possible on the other side, I've typically bounced across this spectrum. And this includes from being a full-time software engineer through to business development, including sales. And one of the key reasons for this spectrum extending to biz dev is about bringing technical credibility to sales, about putting the engineer in front of the client. So I found this approach of bringing technical credibility to sales to be very valuable in the enterprise software space. So today we're going to talk about, or at least I'm going to talk about, company level screw-ups, and I'd like to talk about them at the enterprise level. So enterprise software is a relatively rare space in startups. I'm not talking about Slack or Dropbox or Rackspace. I'm talking about a space where you have a small number of very large customers. And this is also a space where competitors are deeply entrenched because you often need to be a big company to service big companies. So for example, IBM might provide a bespoke software solution to a large corporation, or Lockheed Martin might provide communication systems to government. So you're typically talking about starting at 7-figure contracts. In some cases, we had 9-figure contracts, and they obviously go higher again. So it's not a purchase decision to say, let's sign up for a $6 per month app. It's a very expensive and multi-year obligation. So with these contracts, the depth of the customer relationship is incredibly important, and trust is a big part of that. Now, when I say trust, it should be about your ability to deliver the desired solution. But unfortunately, particularly historically, but it's still in many cases today, this trust is misplaced. The trust is instead aligned with personal relationships, not solution quality. And so this means contracts don't go to the most capable players. And so this active, I guess, questionable decision-making in purchase decisions is pretty deeply entrenched, and it can be so bad or so obvious that litigation arises. So two glorious examples of this are SpaceX and Palantir, who both filed lawsuits against their own customers, to protest anti-competitive behavior. In 2014, SpaceX sued the US Air Force to protest a multi-billion-dollar non-compete contract for 36 rocket launches. And this had previously gone solely to United Launch Alliance, which is a Boeing and Lockheed Martin joint venture. And then again in 2019, they asked the court to force the Air Force to reopen a contract worth $2.3 billion, which was shortlisted to only 3 of SpaceX's competitors. And then my own employer, Palantir, in 2016, disputed a US Army capability where the Army had already spent $3 billion trying to build this solution themselves when Palantir claimed their existing commercial product could already be used. So both in the 2014 SpaceX case and the 2016 Palantir cases, they were successful, but this is pretty risky business. On one hand, you are suing your own customer, and you don't have very many of these customers. But on the other hand, it kind of felt like these customers were commissioning a contractor to build a new handheld computer when they could have just gone out and bought iPhones. Okay, so where are we? Our goal to fight this without going to court was to establish credibility in our solution, not our relationships. And so we used engineers like myself as our salespeople. And we're only going to apply this to a small number of very large customers. So to be clear, when I'm talking about these lawsuits, I'm not even talking about our company's screw-ups yet. I'm just talking about how screwed up the industry is as a whole. So in our goal to establish credibility, we were solution-oriented. We sold outcomes. And we were only paid for delivering outcomes. So I'm going to use a different example to ours because it's better known, especially for Australians. But in 2017, Tesla said, I can fix South Australia's power network in 100 days or it's free. And this is a truly wonderful approach. Apart from the hype around Elon, the customer gets what they want or they don't pay. And Tesla is putting their money where their mouth is, not the customer's money. And this drives exactly what we want: credibility, trust, and makes you the low-risk choice for this given contract. And so this is the approach we took. But there's still a problem. Scope creep is inevitable. And again, there are glorious examples of scope creep for which there is no such guarantee about the cost. So, here in Melbourne, we had Mikey's $550 million cost blowout on implementing that system, which funnily enough, doesn't even sound like that much money anymore. Because for example, in 2014, the Obamacare website cost a cool $2 billion to build. $2 billion to build a website. So in the conventional enterprise model, contractors just use this as a weapon against the customer to justify cost overruns and poor planning. They could say, hey, it's not our fault, the customer changed the scope on this, or they could have outright lied to get the contract and then left the customer no choice. Or maybe they were just the wrong decision and the bad decision was made based on relationships, not credibility. But even in our model where we had fixed price contracts, scope creep still happened. So the customer likes what you're doing and wants more things. And this is scope creep, and it's also an opportunity. So let me now get to the problem, to our screw up. Engineers being engineers, they don't see the business opportunity, they just over-engineer. And actually, I'm not talking about over-engineering with unnecessary solutions like the images I just found on the internet. I'm talking about over-engineering to create awesome solutions, to create better products. So as I'm like Googling for images, I'm thinking as an example, like who's a company that does awesome over-engineering? Dyson. Now, indisputably, the vacuums are over-engineered, but they're still awesome. This car is awesome, but we will never see it because the market has baked in an expectation about what they're willing to pay for a car. And they're not going to pay $300,000 plus for an awesome SUV that's the only product sold. So you have to fit the market. And in our case, we had to fit the contract because in our contracts, we'd already agreed the price. So our failure was killing ourselves to also achieve scope creep within the same contract. And look, if it was a bad idea, if the customer just said, hey, I want all the buttons to be pink, or I don't like this sort of unnecessary feature, we'd just say no. We had a right and control to do that, and we thought it was in the best interest of everybody to not build those features. But if it was a good idea, we'd be like, sure, let's do it. And this was our screw up. Because obviously that diluted our resources and cost us more to complete the contract. It left money on the table because we didn't sufficiently negotiate this new feature commercially. But what's even worse, by changing this ratio of delivery versus pricing, we reset expectations on what we were delivering. So we devalued ourselves. We set an expectation that the next contract would be the same value per price. Our value and our pricing power were damaged, not just for this customer, but for the small community of customers who engaged us through a credibility-based model. Again, we had a small number of large customers. So effectively, our referrals were from customers who got a great solution cheaply. And our referrals expected the same great price. So I really feel like our mistake was swinging the pendulum too far of being anti-cost overrun, anti-scope creep, anti-sales. We were creating additional, like genuine additional value, and it was really in everyone's best interest, the customers and ours, to acknowledge that. Okay, so today I'm at Airwallex, and Airwallex talks about being a product-led organization, which I fully agree with. But we also have a sales team. So my learning going forward is to deploy the pair jointly, to meet in the middle, where someone has to be solution-oriented and someone has to look out for your bottom line. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Shannon. That was awesome, mate. I actually, I've got so many different questions actually from that, because I've experienced a lot of that myself. I do really love the outcome-based model, but you talked about their, scope creep and how that impacted the bottom line. Have you seen many other organizations that actually work on the outcome-based model, or is it sort of like, and you've worked obviously at Palantir and over in the US, like is that a common or becoming more common?
Look, I think the answer is not really, but that's because we were trying to do something deliberately different to disrupt the market. And I think Tesla does the same thing, right? Like it was like the reason why that article made news is because actually it was absolutely unheard of that any government contractor would provide electricity solutions at their risk. And so I think, as something becomes more common, it simply becomes normal, and it sort of reduces down to a very specific product, and that's wonderful. And I think Tesla, is learning about its battery technology and will actually have a lot of future opportunity. But in our case, we're a little bit more on the frontier of certain products that were completely unproven.
Yeah. Cool. Sure, there'll be more questions later, but thanks a lot for that. It was really, really insightful. Next, we're going to go over to Phil, and Phil's currently a product leader at a VR company that's pretty well known over here. It's called Zero Latency. Phil, I'll hand over to you, mate.
Thanks, Al.
And just before that, actually, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to write them into the Q&A or to the chat, and I will read them out when we get to the fireside chat just after this. Thanks. Over to you, mate.
Good stuff. Thanks, Al. Okay, let me get this going. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yep, sure can.
Good stuff. Okay, so hi everyone. My name's Phil Koziel. Thanks for the intro, Sav. I think you pretty much got it there. So I'm currently the lead product manager at Zero Latency VR. As you might expect, it's a VR company providing free roam virtual reality experiences to members of the public. That's the main customer base in about 23 countries around the world. We have 45 sites. And so it's really a physical bricks and mortar organization where you can buy a ticket and you can go along, put some VR gear on and have these immersive virtual reality experiences. So it's the first time working in VR for me. And before that, I've had a kind of a series of roles in product management, spanning across marketing technology, travel tech, a couple of different roles, and originally kind of cut my teeth in the industry as a business analyst before transitioning across into the kind of product space. I'll tell you a little bit more as I go through my story. And I just wanted to kick off by kind of making this statement that probably my biggest screw up ever was thinking that my failures are worthless. I think this has been touched on already by Shannon, but you know, I think I've learned more from a handful of failures than I ever have from all my wins. I would say that, you know, there's maybe a fairly equal balance there. I think sometimes you just have to make failures as you go and hopefully you make them fast and then you build on those, and that's how you get to that point of winning. You know, often a test, you have two results. One of them may be a failure, one of them may be a win. I think the worst part about failing, especially early on, and this will be a bit of a theme, is I'm going back to the kind of beginning of my career here, but one of the worst parts about failing is that it can really dent your confidence and allow the kind of imposter syndrome that product managers especially, I think, can suffer from in those early days. You know, I'm a product manager and I get things wrong sometimes, but I learn when I do and I adapt, and I think that's a really important thing that I've learned, you know, and taken from some of those real painful early failures, and I'll tell you a little bit about one of those now. So, so the screw up, what happened? So I was, I'm not going to go into the kind of names and of people or organisations, just to try and keep it a little bit vanilla, but you can probably piece it together if you really wanted to. But so back in 2015, I was working for an enterprise SaaS company. I was a product analyst, kind of like a BA within a product team. The company had acquired a competitor mainly for its user base, a particularly valuable feature, and the exceptionally talented founders of that business who ultimately joined the company that I was working for. And I was tasked with integration of that feature into the product that I was now working with. And that was pretty much the extent of the brief that I was given. So off I went. This was my first big shot as a product manager. I was pumped, just so excited, motivated. I'd spent kind of 4 years or so working as a BA before this. And, you know, I'd generally just been handed projects to analyze. So now this was my chance to have an impact on change of a product and actually show my capabilities beyond just, you know, that kind of analytical skill set. So off I went. I dived straight into the detail. I started capturing requirements, thinking about how it should all work. And I was working with those founders that had come across to understand the user journeys. I was documenting data taxonomy, terminology, putting together, you know, gap analysis of the things that we needed to bring across for this to work. I started even sketching, and then took my kind of sketches and involved a UI designer, and they knocked together some wireframes for me, and it felt like it was just going so well. And then I got to this first major milestone, which was this first showcase after a few weeks of working on what I'd been tasked with. And I was still working as a business analyst on the side of all of this. So it was something that I was managing part-time, but it taken me a little bit of time to get to this first milestone. So I'd invited stakeholders. I'd got the CEO back, which was the first time that we would be coming together again since that initial brief. And so the boardroom felt packed. I was pretty green still. I was used to having large meetings, but this one was me kind of standing up and pitching something effectively to a room full of stakeholders. And so the 20 or so stakeholders around the board table, watching the wireframes flash up on the big screen, and I was talking to how I thought they could work. And the CEO stopped me, and he calmly explained that this just wouldn't work and that we didn't really need to go any further with the showcase. And the following silence was deafening. I kind of stood there just, struck with semi-grief almost and shock. But what he had realized was that I just didn't share his foresight and his kind of vision for how to integrate that feature set to have maximum impact for the end user, for the people that that were paying for this product currently. It was a B2B product, so these are people that were running businesses. And I dived into that detail. I'd started figuring out the how, and I'd kind of missed some of those early steps that are really crucial. So we all left the boardroom, and he had a quiet word with me just as we were leaving, and he said, "Hey, look, let's catch up. I'll explain." And so I booked some time. I booked some time with him, and he gave me essentially what was missing. He gave me the backstory. What did he see in that company that he had acquired that was so valuable? How would our users benefit from this feature? What problem would it solve for them? How much revenue did he expect that this could actually make for us? And where did it all kind of fit into the jigsaw puzzle of the user interface to make it intuitive and natural rather than this kind of abstract or isolated new function? And I feel like effectively what he was giving me in that meeting, that maybe he had noticed that, the brief was a bit sparse early on, and maybe I lacked the skills at that time to kind of go back up the chain and figure out a lot of that why rather than just the how. But what I feel like he was giving me was the product vision. And it was kind of a big aha moment for me. And luckily it happened really early on. So for me, product vision is, I'll kind of talk a little bit through some of the things that it means for me. And this, I feel like, is a great quote that comes out of actually Alice in Wonderland. It's kind of paraphrased from a back and forth between Alice and another character. But if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I think that's kind of how I felt at that moment. Was, I didn't really know where I was going with it. I knew kind of the jobs to be done, but I ended up going anywhere, and it wasn't really the intended path. So some of the things that are really important, I think, around product vision is it's a lot like the destination. It can take many forms. It can include different things. And I'll share a few actual resources that I've found really helpful over the years in crafting product vision. They'll be in the final slide, so we'll be able to circulate that. Once I have a destination, or once I have that product vision in mind, I really need to tell that story. And it needs to be convincing. It needs to be data backed and backed by data and research. I can't order a team to go in a direction. That's not my power as a product manager. I have to really persuade them, or they won't stay on that path if they don't believe in that kind of vision and that destination. And also they'll potentially be demotivated and kind of not feel like they're contributing valuable things to the product. I need to be open to having change, to having things change, and also to learn from different perspectives of the team. So although we may have that destination from day one, it may change or waver slightly over time. And if the team are aligned on that destination, they'll still head in that right direction. If we find ourselves getting lost along the way, I guess it's a bit like a map. The vision can be used in just about every meeting. So you can make decisions with it. You can test hypotheses against it. You can check if it's still realistic. but it can be almost something that you slap up on the wall and you kind of use it as your mantra. Is what we're talking about in terms of prioritization, or the way that this should behave, or the kind of the way that this feature might work. Is it really going to achieve that vision for us? And I guess being a product manager is maybe similar to being a conductor, but of a jazz band. You've got lots of different people maybe jamming at different times, and you're trying to kind of pull them all together. You're kind of that glue that sticks them. So this is another realization for me, and it's a pretty long quote, but it's really fundamental to that learning, was that product management and project management are really not the same. You know, a project is an organizing construct for internal labor, whereas a product is a thoughtful response to a human appetite. I think that focusing on customer needs and not just the jobs to be done is essential to success. And you need to do both, and there's definitely overlap between the two. But at that time for this project, I had dove straight into almost project mode when I really needed to get back to that kind of why and who. My screw up taught me a lot about product vision. Once the vision is clear, you can get down to objectives and strategy and execution. But not before. You need that vision first. Taking the team along for the ride is essential, and your destination needs to be clear up front. Assumptions, especially in that design phase, will not lead to success a lot of the time. The vision will help bust some assumptions right out of the gates. And sometimes your vision is going to come from elsewhere. It's not always going to come from the CEO. Most of the time, it's actually probably going to be the product manager's role to actually come up with that. It's not always just going to fall into your lap. And so then I've just shared here a few resources that I find really, really helpful. So Board of Innovation has an excellent product vision template that allows you to kind of almost, paint by numbers as you go through to create a product vision. Strategizer, a lot of product managers will be really familiar with. There's lots of amazing things like business model canvases. And the other resources that I've added here are just people that I've found a huge amount of guidance from online. Bruce McCarthy was at Leading the Product last year and has an amazing book on product vision and OKRs. And also Radhika Dutt, who writes about radical product thinking and the use of vision and radical product vision to really not just continue to iterate in small chunks forever, but to really go, how do we want to get to that next level? So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Philip. That was really, really good. Actually, I'll tell you, I'll ask my first question, but before I do that, we'll get the other guys to unmute as well. And Susan also, who's a senior product manager from Covidence and from previously from Finch as well, will be joining us. I can't see you quite on screen yet, Susan, so you can turn on your camera when you're ready, and same with you, Shannon. But my first question, Phil, is probably to you, actually. Product vision is definitely one thing that I think about a lot. Actually, funnily enough, the other day, my son, he's 5 years old, and his preschool said that they wanted to get an occupational therapist in to come and see him and observe him because he's a little bit strange. I mean, he's a little bit strange at home as well. So anyway, and the end outcome was they told us at the end of the day that we'd observed him, and he's got this thing called big picture thinking. And I'm like, what's that? And they said, he always starts with the end in mind, and we're going to have to work on that. And I'm like, really? You want to work on that? Like, that's what we're trying to teach people to do, not trying to work on. So my question to you is really like, what are some of the tools or techniques I've heard about? Like, I've used previously, like press releases, they talk about press releases and things like that you've used to sort of like communicate that vision, not just to product, but to sales and commercial and marketing and all of those sorts of things. And then that opened up to the rest as well, for sure.
Yeah, that's Your son sounds fantastic, and I agree. I don't think that's something you want to train out. I think that's an exceptional gift.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's have more of that. I think, like I said during the presentation, like I think vision takes many forms. I don't, you know, you can write a vision statement. It can be almost just like a short, customer centric. What's the differentiator and what's the value to be added? It's 3 components. You know, that can be helpful, and that's a cool thing that you can kind of put on the wall. But I think one of the most effective things that I have found is telling that story. It's I think you said it. Get on a call, whether it be like, you know, pre-COVID, standing up in front of a group of people and actually just kind of talking through, hey, look, we went and did research on this. We went and met with, for myself in a B2B space at the moment, we went and met this, you know, mom and pop shop over in the States, and they really wanted this from the product that they bought. And just trying to kind of frame up all of those insights and all of that research and all of that data in a kind of story-based way that I feel like, you know, thousands of years have been spent by humans telling stories, and it's a really quick and easy way to get people to kind of come along for it and buy into what you're talking about. Not necessarily to kind of, you know, paint the wrong picture, but I think telling stories is a really, really good way to get people along for that ride, and it sticks in people's memories as well. We're good at remembering stories. Having things like personas around, I feel like there's this big pack that goes with product vision, so that you can really, actually another quote from, I think it was Bruce McCarthy, talks about how would you play the character of your customer in a movie? And so really getting under the skin of your customers to the point where you feel like you can almost play their part in a movie or on stage, for example. When it comes to vision, it's probably similar. If you really feel like you know your customers that well and you understand their needs and their problems, when it comes to writing vision, it's not such a big leap to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Any of the other guys want to chip in?
I think what I will probably say is that where I've seen vision work extremely well is when it focuses on a problem that you want to solve. So very easily people link vision to a roadmap and a strategy, and all of a sudden it just becomes a bunch of features. A bunch of features with a bunch of metrics that you want to change and improve on. But I find that a lot of people in your team actually know what the pain points feel like, whether that person is your design or your engineering team or the sales team or the marketing team. They hear from customers in very different ways. They know what the pain points of the product are. So building your vision and your strategy and your roadmap around solving a particular problem, it actually empowers you to be able to take whatever tactic that looks like. So I think the problem with sometimes vision is that when your feature set changes because your customers aren't responding to it, people feel like the vision is changing, but that's not the case. Your vision doesn't change, the way you get there does. So pinning it to a pain point, like the persona, like that, what Phil talked about like getting in the skin, filling it out, understanding it, knowing what the drivers are, that is how you get good outcomes. That's how you bring people along the journey, because they know that that tactic you deployed didn't solve your pain point. And so it feels like a continuous path you're going on, rather than this feature, this feature, this feature. And then it feels like a lot of things in the wrong direction and like not a unified vision.
And
Yeah,
just quickly,
go for it, mate.
The only thing I would add is just Phil's earlier comment around understanding the why behind something. And it doesn't matter if it's the vision of the entire company or a very, very specific feature. It applies to the CEO and to an employee on their first day. And it's really just about, I think, enforcing that question, right? Because like it forces the individual, whoever at whatever level, to sort of internalize and be able to respond to that, to justify what they're doing. And, you know, I think everything falls out from that.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely agreed. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. Mike Dickinson, he's asked, have you applied a North Star metric to your vision? If you have, how did you get buy-in for it? And if successful, do you think it helps focus the product team and the organization? Open to any of you guys. So it's a North Star metric for your product vision.
I can field that one.
Yeah, cool.
Hi, Mike, by the way. We used to work together. Thanks for joining. We have worked, in fact, just recently at Zero Latency, we worked with a North Star. We were going through a pretty big evolution to be more of a product-led organization and putting OKRs in place, and talking with the co-founders and directors about the vision that they have for the company from a commercial perspective. And as we were boiling that down and then starting to work on product vision, there were some quite clear kind of, I guess, outcomes that we really wanted to have as almost like a mega key result. You know, not just hey, we want to increase revenue by this many thousand of dollars, but we really want to have this huge impact. I'm actually, off the top of my head, I'm forgetting exactly the ones that we've set, but what I found was actually some of the projects that we've been working on have been focused on things like paying down tech debt to make this like a strong foundation that we can then build upon as we go into the future. And I think North Stars were great at that early stage because it got everybody thinking about, okay, if we want to be able to ship twice a week, or if we want to be able to say yes to feature requests with confidence, you know, what are the kinds of phrases that we would have as a North Star? They've had a mixed response, if I'm really honest. I don't think that they're enduring and really long lasting, not quite like product vision perhaps is. But they're definitely a really good kind of conversation starter to go, what's your absolute like perfect world look like for you?
So it's actually quite funny. I just started my role at Confidence, and one of the things I'm looking at the moment is figuring out what our North Star metric is. And the reason why I find it important, it's not necessarily, I don't utilize North Star so much from a vision perspective, but it's the metric you look at to know whether you're doing really well or you're doing really badly. So most tech companies they deploy agile principles. The idea is that you deploy really frequently and you want to bring value to your customers pretty consistently. So how do you know what you're prioritizing for the team to deliver is actually helping you grow? Like, at what point does a customer or a business, if that's your customer, when do you have them for life? When do you trigger that aha moment for your customer? And so the North Star is supposed to be the leading indicator for you to see that you are growing, that you're going in the right direction, rather than looking at a series of metrics that are, oh, like user growth is increasing, and then needing to look at it over a 3-month period or any type of period to figure out whether you're doing the right thing or wrong thing, and whether you need to concentrate time on like product time or marketing time or sales time to boost like your growth metrics. So for me, North Star is just, it's a metric that tells you that everything is going well or something is not going well and you're not growing. The difficulty is figuring out what that is, because the business will have buy-in if everyone feels like they're succeeding. You don't get buy-in when it's like vanity metrics. Oh, look, we're growing, like our user base is growing month on month 5%. And then you look at it and it's like, well, it's really easy for people to sign up. They're actually not engaging with the product. And so your like retention rate is really bad. And so that's how you get drop off, because your North Star is actually not a North Star. It's just a number that has no correlation to revenue or growth or like keeping that customer for like a period of time, like lifetime value, for example.
It's really interesting because I do a little bit of consulting, and often, like, you know, when you speak to a CEO or an MD, like the end lagging indicator is revenue, but it's not really seen as a lagging indicator. Like, they're like, North Star is revenue increase of 20% a year or 30% a year. Okay, that's fine. But that's actually a lagging indicator. So what are the leading indicators that it's going to tell us that that revenue is going to move? And like, once that conversation's going, then they're thinking, oh shit, yeah, okay, then let's have a brainstorm about what those leading indicators are that might help move the revenue in that direction. So yeah, I think it's like a super common problem.
Yeah.
Shannon, did you have something to? Yeah, not easy to answer for sure. Shannon, did you have something you were going to add, man? Or?
Just briefly, I think I would just decouple the North Star from the metric. Like a lot of my North Stars in the past have not been quantitative at all. And I think there are quantitative examples like user growth and revenue and number of customers and other things, but they are just proxies for that North Star. And as we just talked about, they can be misleading and they can be lag. So, you know, I don't bias too much on the metric. I just bias on the vision and how that, you know, leads us to make decisions.
Yeah, cool. A few more questions. One from Andrew. G'day, mate. What's the minimum amount of information that you need to take the next step in turning a vision into an actual product? So I think he means, you know, turning an idea and a purpose and vision into a product. Like, what do you do next? What's the minimum amount of information you would do before you start building, maybe?
I think it depends on how big your organization is. So I've worked in pretty big corporates that require a lot of information before we do anything. And sometimes, you know, we've spent, you know, 6 figures on employing a consulting company to do customer research with our customers to gather information to figure out whether it's worth building. But then I've worked at early stage startups where intuition is key. Like, yes, we need to collect data. We need to know what's happening in the market. We need to know what our target market is interested in, what their pain points are. You look at metrics, you kind of almost use what you have access to. You pick up the phone, you talk to customers. And so I'd probably say at an early stage startup, we didn't need as much, but for a big corporate, it felt like the business needed more information. What I would probably say is that if you're in a early, like a small, like if you're a part of a startup that are in early stages, I think team intuition is really important and founder intuition is very important, because what you'll find is that the companies that do well, it's a combination of just knowing when to go for it and being aware that there are assumptions, but being hyper aware of your assumptions and knowing when you'll be able to validate them and when you're not able to when you can't validate them until you're live. So it's all about a bit of assessing risk depending on how big and transformative this idea is, how much time and energy is going to be involved in testing it out. But yeah.
Yeah, completely. It's risk management, I think. Any of the rest of you guys?
Yeah, I think the minimum probably for me in terms of vision is you've probably got the 3. I kind of mentioned that formula that Bruce McCarthy shared. It's probably the who in terms of your customer. So who are you talking about when you're designing this, whether it's a feature for an enterprise organization's product, or is it a startup that you're having an idea for with, you know, a potential co-founder over coffee or beers or whatever. But it's, yeah, who is this? Who's your market? Then what's the problem or opportunity that you're either looking to solve or take advantage of? And then how will you do it differently? So is it already being done, and are you looking to disrupt that, or what would set you aside from current competition in that space? And I think if you get those three things pretty well pinned down, regardless of whether it's kind of an enterprise feature or a brand new business that you're looking to build, I think from that point you can then jump in and start to do things like business model canvases if it's a new business, or even just experience canvases if it's an existing product. And that's where some of those resources that I shared have been really helpful for me. Is I've introduced experience canvases to zero latency, and it's just helped people to stop, a bit like to what Shannon said earlier around engineers will engineer, and potentially if given enough time they'll kind of over engineer. And I think making everybody in that team step back and go, okay, what's enough, and what really is that, like maybe it's the North Star, or maybe it's that kind of intended outcome. What is that, and how are we going to get that? And starting small, building on that, I think is a good way to approach it.
Good answer. Got one that is from Daniel. If you have one enterprise customer that is by far your largest, should you let them dictate your product strategy, roadmap, and vision? I feel like that is probably going to start with you, Shannon, and then the rest of you can jump in as well.
No, it's a really good and constantly difficult question. You as a company have a vision as to where you want to get to, and what type of product that you're trying to build, and you have to sort of be thinking about, is this enough? Is this product enough for what we're trying to deliver on, versus what the customer wants or is asking for? And it's really just a lot of questions around, well, if we did this feature for this customer, firstly, is it of any value, right? And so we talked about how we literally get customers who just want to like change the format or something like that, or change the layout of the UI, and you're like, this is really not important. I know perhaps you think that this is like a custom product, but it's not, and we need to focus on the really important outcome, our joint vision for this contract. If you can bring them back to that, then perhaps it can help eliminate the sort of more superfluous items. But then you're asking, is this a repeatable feature? Is this a feature that is going to be sellable to more and more customers and going to be like long-term valuable to maintain? Sometimes you don't know the answer to that question, and I'm actually fine with the idea of building something a couple of times, because it is just with one customer and they understand you're building it with them, and therefore you can make changes. And then you start to get and understand the recipe for, is this thing valuable? Like perhaps predicting before you've built anything if it's going to be valuable is a really tough question. But then you also are led down to making some really tough decisions, and this is like genuinely really tough, is if we do experiment with this and we do build it and it doesn't work out, can we kill it? Because otherwise we've just created hundreds of additional features for possibly dozens of customers that we have to maintain, that we didn't actually want to oblige ourselves to keep doing. And so that's a much more difficult conversation, is like, how do you sort of push the roadmap in the direction you want after you may have committed to something that wasn't as valuable? But it's a genuinely hard problem.
Yeah, I think that is it's a difficult problem, and it's also one that you think about commercially. If you've basically created this feature that none of your other customers like, even though this is your largest revenue earner, if that revenue earner is then gone and you've managed to annoy the rest of the pie, like, where's your company going to be sitting at as well? And we used to often have a look at the pie to say, like, how is our revenue distributed, to make sure that we had that in our mind as well, that we've got many customers and not just one customer that we're focused on. Another one here, which is I think a common one, and open to any of you guys. I found that the terms vision, mission, strategy, objectives are often used differently within companies I've been in. Do you have any tips for how to help unify a team or organization around these definitions? Open to any of you.
Yeah, I've been going through this a little bit myself, introducing lots of new concepts and processes at zero latency. And I had feedback that quite visceral from one particular guy in our support team who's fantastic. But he said, there's so much corporate bullshit going on, like, all these buzzwords and all these things, and like, where's, what does it all mean? And I felt like it was great. It was actually fantastic, very honest feedback. And what I think I kind of responded with was that vision is your blue sky, best possible outcome in the future. It's your dream. Like, what is it? Why are we doing this? And what does it look like if we succeed in years to come? Strategy is the plan for the battle, and then tactics or objectives are how you're actually going to go and execute that strategy. So if it's unfortunately to use a war analogy, but if you're going to take a hill because your enemy's at the top of it, do you go around to the side and you're going to send some troops off to throw a curveball? Maybe that's the strategy, but then the actual tactics are how many people do you put there, and what weapons, or what time are they going to launch? And so that's how I would kind of break that down across that stack. Is vision is almost like your dream. Strategy is the bigger picture of the way you're going to go about it, and then tactics is the actual boots on the ground.
I would say I have no idea how to define those things. But the most important thing to me is as long as it's consistent within the organization. And that applies to the technology you use as well. And sometimes, some things aren't perfect, and there's always a lot of critiquing and sort of suggesting that we need a new definition, or something doesn't fit into like this pillar, so we're going to create another pillar. You're always going to have that. I think you're actually trying to sort of minimize the scope or proliferation of those terms, and just keeping on the same page is far more important than the definitions themselves.
Yeah, that's completely agree there. I think that one of the things that we should never be doing, like, everyone's got to be on the same page. So whether it's mission, vision, values, strategy, whatever it is, it should be something that is memorable and you're on the same page, not that you have to, say, give me 1 second, let me just go look at the Confluence site, figure out what our product vision and, you know what I mean?
Which site?
Yeah, exactly.
Which team's glossary page are you going to look at?
Yeah, so, yeah, I think we know that one. Okay, Saurav's got a question here as well. Sometimes you have more than one problem to look into solving which aligns with the purpose and vision of your product. How do you decide what to pick first?
It's like, what's your vision? Prioritize the one that aligns with your vision. Yeah.
He said it aligns with, it aligns with your vision. Both align with your vision. Which one do you pick?
Impact. Which one has how acute is the pain point? These things there are always things. The product management feels like a prioritization role all the time. You're picking what we focus on, the problem you're trying to solve now versus down the track. You have to find a way to quantify the value of these things. So there's a bunch of different frameworks that people can use, like RICE is a prioritization framework where you measure the impact of the change versus the reach versus the effort. Again, I know this is not a great answer, but yes, use one of the frameworks and then go on intuition, but make sure you're talking to your customers. Make sure you actually fully appreciate what the problem is and how you're trying to solve it. Yeah, that's probably it's not an easy, I don't think it's an easy, there's no straightforward answer, but that's probably how it happens, right?
Yeah, I think that the framework is like, those are not the challenges for me. I think sometimes the challenges are being told to do both, and sort of actually recognizing that you have to choose, or recognizing like what information you need to make that decision and whether you have it or not. And there's going to be times when, you know, you're trying to ask a question and actually it's very easy to go out and seek further information to make a decision between these two options. And there's going to be times when you just don't know what's going to happen in the future, or it's not possible to get that information. And I think like being conscious of sort of being fair about the information you have between the decisions is like the most important thing for then being able to make a calculated decision based on the information you have to pick one of those things. Whereas I think very often we're trying to make decisions like effectively in unfair circumstances.
Got a couple more questions. I know we've only got 3 minutes left. One is from Nick. What's been a great example of a company you admire from a product vision perspective? Problem to execution, in brackets. Yeah. Open to anyone.
Oh, I mean, I'm a big advocate for Canva. I feel like very early in my career, I think I sat in a full day InDesign course and I don't even know how to use InDesign still. And so I think they had a very clear kind of vision to disrupt the entire space of how that works. And they did it using a template concept that isn't new, but they made the experience so seamless that they have managed to disrupt that industry, and they're growing rapidly.
Yeah, amazing.
Simple things are very hard to achieve sometimes, and they've very successfully managed to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say I honestly don't have a lot of good examples, other than sort of the really obvious ones, like some of which I actually referenced in my presentation. But it's true actually that some of the most simple solutions are the best. And you know, like one product I referenced in at the last page is just like a link to my bio, right? And that product, that is all it does. And it sort of just like Susan reminded me of like how some products can be just so clean. Versus like very enviable and admirable companies like SpaceX, for example, which is far from clean, but did actually achieve their goals, which is phenomenal. So yeah, there's a true spectrum of great companies out there.
Yeah, I think for me, you don't always get to know the actual product vision. Sometimes you hear kind of like a vision statement for a company as a customer or a consumer on the outside. But definitely, I can imagine a company like Headspace, for example, that's they probably sat, you know, the founder sat down with somebody technical and in the early days and said, hey, I want to change the way people meditate. I want to make it available and accessible and integratable for, you know, for everybody around the world. And I think having some kind of social or like conscious decision-making process in that, like setting of a vision, I think that would be a hugely exciting thing to work on, and yeah, to look back and feel like you've had a huge impact on society. I think it'd be excellent.
Awesome.
Not always possible though, mind you.
Yeah. One last one that we've got here. What's your approach for validating whether the features in a backlog will be delivering value and help the business achieve outcomes thereafter? I actually read something on this, or I listened to it. I think it was Jason Fried, who's I think the founder of Basecamp, and he always talks about, like, I think it was him, it could have been someone else, about I'm not really going to test with my customers anymore, like give them a survey or ask them like, does this look good, are you going to buy this, like, because the information that I get is just not correct. So I'm going to build it and deploy it and then let them then see if it actually provides value to them, because that's the actual test of. So that's definitely one approach. It's obviously a risky approach, but it depends how, you know, short you keep your increments. Any of you guys, any other suggestions?
It's a big question.
I think it's the same, perhaps the same answer as what Susan and I alluded to earlier, which is that there are frameworks for doing this, but often the problem is actually sort of having like clear data and fair signal across all the different features you're tracking. Like I personally feel like I am terrible at writing a book on product management and all the different frameworks, techniques, and measurements you can use and steps that you will take. But actually, you know, when I think about some of the pace of growth of the startups that I have worked for in the past and that I want to continue to work for, it's literally more about keeping the wheels on and just making sure you actually remember you still have maintenance due on that product, and then deciding if you want to keep it, right? So I think like when you're sort of asking some of these questions, I feel like, yeah, they're really comfortable problems to have, and you know, I'm sure you'll figure out how to like apply a framework, a tagging system, you know, a metric to deciding what's next, if something is working, you know, whether it be, you know, data feedback or whatever else.
Fair enough.
I think the key thing in what you said, Sav, was just like build like the minimum viable prototype that you need to validate it. If you can't get all the information, you know, whether it's a clickable prototype, whether it's something that's live, just, I mean, yeah, you don't know. And I think a lot of these things can really come down to, yeah, you know what, actually, Shay, maybe you're right, like really hard to write a book about it. I do think like really successful high growth companies at the beginning is really based on intuition. I know that's not very helpful, but the one thing I would say is like a lot of this stuff is unknown and you can only do, like you can make the best decisions with the data you have at that point in time. So either go out and get more information to help you make that decision, but at some point you need to make a risk and make a bet and know what you don't have and be okay with that and see what happens. But so don't spend all your time building like the Rolls Royce of that feature if you don't know if it's going to deliver the value to the business.
I think the question around how do you know what will deliver value and help achieve those business outcomes, I think get really clear on what value is, and like to your customers or to your users, what do they value? Maybe you can find that out through analytics or maybe through their spending behaviors. But yeah, again, the many different frameworks, you could get lost and drown in those fairly easily, trying to perfect the kind of crystal ball. But yeah, sometimes that kind of cheeseburger and work your way up to the Big Mac is definitely a really good way to go.
Awesome. I like that. I think we're going to end it there, guys. Thank you very much for joining us, Phil, Susan, Shannon. It's been really good. Thanks everyone else also for all the attendees for joining us. It's really good attendance this time around. We've recorded it. We'll publish it on our YouTube channel. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll be back again. I'm sure that Sammy will have an amazing lineup again. But for now, enjoy rainy Friday in Melbourne, if you guys are all in Melbourne. See you guys later. Ciao.
See you guys. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Have a lovely weekend.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.